Let's style those two phrases. So go to Style, and right here, let's say A dot next. We forgot to give the A class. Okay, I had the intention of giving the A class. So the A element has an attribute href. It also must have a class next. Okay, and the same class applies to the other A. Okay, so the two A's have the same class next in addition to their other attribute href. Going back to style, a.next, font size, something like 1em, text decoration none, and color red or anything you think is suitable with that light blue background. And since we're here, we might as well do the hover state. Hover, let's just change the color to white. Save and refresh. So we have the previous link and the next link. The next should go to project.b.html. We haven't built the file, but the URL tells us that that's project B. And then the previous project should go to project.z.html, which is equally a page you can build in the event you choose to complete this work for your own. Now remember that what you see here is the layout that we built for the wide screens. So this layout with the 4 columns is the layout we built for the wide screens, which means what we inserted inside of @media screen and minimum width 981 pixels. Now let's see what happens when we scale the window down and hit the 980 pixel point. Let's see what happens to the layout. Okay, so let's pretend we're on the portfolio page or perhaps on the about page, whichever page, it doesn't matter. Let's say portfolio page. I want to scale this window down and observe right now what's going to happen. So I'm still over 981 pixels. I'm still over 981 pixels up until this moment. You see this moment, right? This moment, this very moment when the layout changed from a 4-column layout to not reading the CSS anymore, that's the 980 pixel moment. And everything after that, under that, is under 980 pixels. Same thing for the about page. If I go to about, this is my layout, and I scale down. And when I reach that moment, which is now, this very moment here, my layout changes because we have not yet established the style for the max width 980 pixels, which is the narrow screens. And that's what we want to do right now. Okay, so we want to build a stacked layout for the narrow screens right now. So let's go to style, and between these two curly braces where it says maximum width 980 pixels, let's make our changes. Section.skills, this is for the about page. Let's add some padding, 0 from the top, 3% from the right, 1% from the bottom, and 5% from the left. Let's add border bottom, 0.1 em dashed white, and some line height of 1.5 em. Save this and let's refresh this page. Okay, this is what we get. In fact, this is a 5% padding. I think I prefer the 3% so that everything is aligned on the left side. Let's change the 5% padding of the right to 3%. and refresh, and now that's much better. Okay, so things are aligned. You see that there is nice padding around each of those stacked cells or sections, if you will, and it looks, you know, it's appropriate for a narrow screen. Now, if I scale this back up, the layout changes immediately. Okay. Now back to the stacked layout. When we scroll down, there's again that problem because this footer is fixed. It has a position fixed. We want to add some margin right here under arrows, awards, in order to have some space. So let's add a class to the last section in about.html page. Go to about.html. And the very last section already has a class skills. Let's give it another class, distance narrow. That's what I'm going to call it. Okay, and then back in style, dot distance narrow, open close curly braces, margin bottom is 5%. Save this and let's refresh the page. Okay, we saved it. Okay, so now we can read the whole thing. And let's continue styling. We also have the portfolio page to work with because, as you can see, the layout is now as such. Instead of having 4 columns, we can have 2 columns. Okay, 1 column is a bit too, you know, it looks awkward a bit. So let's just change the 4-column layout to a 2-column layout. So again, go to style and let's write li.projects, open close curly braces, float left, width 49.75%. Again, you don't want to put 50% because there's the width of that dashed border, so you don't want the second cell to go on a new line. Padding top 5%, border right 0.1 em, dashed and white, and then border bottom, same thing, 0.1 em, dashed and white. Let's see what happens. Let's refresh the page. Okay, that's wonderful. We have 2 columns as opposed to 4, right? We have 2 columns and everything looks wonderful. Now obviously we have to see what's happening. If I take this window and I scale it down even more, you see that the images are not scaling down. They're not decreasing in size with the width of the window. So that's wrong. Look at this overlap. So to solve this, all of the images should have a percentage value. Okay, so we have to do that by all means. Let's go back to style and just type li.projects space image and give it a width such as 75%. Within that cell will look nice, and also some margin bottom of 1%. Let's refresh. Okay, so that's the 75%. The image, the thumbnail is 75%. The width of the cell, which means 75%, the 49.75%. Now, if I scale down, the images will decrease in size, which is very nice, organic, and responsive. This is how it's supposed to be. Okay? Let's scroll down and we notice there's a small problem here. The last 2 cells, again, there's the issue of we don't see the project name. So let's give the the class distance narrow that we gave earlier to the last two LIs on this portfolio page. So let's go to portfolio.html, and the last two LIs, the reason obviously is because we have only two LIs at the bottom in the case of the narrow layout. So portfolio.html, go to the last two LIs and give the last two LIs that same class name, distance narrow, space distance narrow, right? And that's the only thing we need to do because we already styled distance narrow. The class distance narrow is supposed to have a margin bottom of 5%. So we hope that this works when we refresh the page. Indeed, we have that 5% added because we just gave these two LIs that class name distance narrow, and since that class is already styled with a margin bottom of 5%, we see the result right here. Okay, so that's basically it with regards to the contact page. Just go ahead and duplicate the index.html page, call it contact, and open it. Let's increase the font size, and then here make sure to have the A selected, the ID selected for the A of the contact button, and then click on contact. That should load the contact page. So in short, we have the home page. When you click on the logo, it takes you home, which has an empty design that you can fill with what you would like, such as a cycle jQuery plugin or anything that you find appropriate as the home page of your portfolio website. The About page has a big section at the top, which is an intro section with 4 columns at the bottom. When we scale the window down, or when we view the website from a tablet or from a phone, the wide layout changes to a stacked layout. Okay, and then we have the portfolio page, which is made up of thumbnails of projects. When we click on a project, it loads that project. And then we have the buttons that take us to the next and the previous project. And again, when we scale down this window, or when we view it from a phone, for example, we get a different layout, the layout of 2 columns as opposed to 4 columns, as you can see. And then the contact page is empty because you can fill it with a form, for example, social media icons, or anything you like. So this is responsive web design. It's pretty straightforward. We obviously know most of this with the exception of the @media syntax, which is a CSS3 syntax, and which is obviously necessary in order to make that difference and that distinction between the wide screen layout and the narrow screen layout.